Have you ever watched a scary movie or a slasher flick and thought, I don't think these people know what they're doing. I think I could have survived that. Well, Terrascape 2 challenges you with that. See, this is a game where you're going to be playing either as the survivors in a slasher flick type setting or the killer themselves. This is a cat and mouse game that we're going to be taking a dive into. This is the second iteration of Terrorscape. Obviously, Terrorscape came out about 2 years ago. What was launched on crowdfunding about 2 years ago, recently fulfilled not that long ago. And this is the second iteration, adding more killers, more survivors, and additional ways to win the game. So we're going to be diving into this prototype. I'm going to give you my thoughts on the mechanics, the gameplay, and how it feels to play this game, as well as go over some of the things I liked and didn't like about this experience. So if that sounds interesting for you, if you think that will be fulfilling or valuable for your backing decisions, please stay tuned for more. Okay, welcome to Game Brigade. My name is Brian. Today, as I said, we're talking about Terrascape 2. I am going to go over the mechanics of how this game plays in a very light way. I don't want to dive into the nuances of the rules, but I want to make sure you guys understand what the game does or is trying to do so you understand the mechanics that I'm talking about when I'm diving deeper into specific things I liked and didn't like. Also note, there is this large structure that sits in the middle. It's a divider between both teams. We're going to be keeping that to the side, but we will pull over this little dice tower tray that is part of it because this structure is part of the gameplay experience. You have parts of it that show what keys you've unlocked, your dice tower, as well as the helicopter rescue time. So it's actually gameplay relevant, but it would be completely pointless to keep that here in the middle of the video as we're trying to film. So looking at the board, you're going to have a mirrored image here of the survivors board as well as the killers board. The survivors board has a little bit more going on, so let's talk about what we have here. Going from left to right, to the left you have adjacent rooms such as a radio station, research lab. Some of these have icons on them indicating available actions that you're going to be taking as survivors, such as the radio room requires you to repair the radio, represented by these different cogs. Some of these rooms also have additional little icons next to it, telling you what kind of loot you're going to be most likely getting from that, as well as what deck you're going to be looting from. So if you loot from the research lab, you'll be looting from the keys deck, which also gives you a more likely chance of finding keys. Doesn't necessarily mean you will always find keys, but it's a more likely chance. Continuing on, looking at the board, you have some arrows. These indicate movement restrictions, so you can move out of these windows, but you cannot move in unless you have something that says otherwise. And then you have different regions with differentiated by these dotted lines, as well as colors. You've got the red color section, the blue color section, and the green color section. Over to the right, you have the different types of decks that you could draw from, that you could loot for different types of gears as a survivor. You have more weapons, which will be found in the outdoor storage. Additional common items, which can be found up here in the radio, just in general, actually. You can loot when you end your round. Medical facility stuff from the medical bay, and then keys can be found in the key room. And the final last piece of information on the far right is the snowcat, which additional gears that you have to use to repair it, as well as you need to find fuel in one of the decks to fuel it, which you would then place here on the icon to show you have received the fuel for it, that you'll have to then use to escape. There are several different ways the survivors are trying to win this game. The first one is to escape, obviously. You can escape in 3 different ways. You can escape through the exits. You have the hidden exit, which requires you to have a secret map to get access to it. The main exit, which requires you to have 5 or so keys. I believe it's 5 keys. 5 keys to be able to unlock the main gates. You also have the helicopter that you can escape through, but you need to make a radio call. Once you've repaired the radio and made the call, then the at the top of the board that we're not showing because it's part of that large structure, we'll have a countdown timer which has the helicopter that will come and rescue you within 5 turns. That's a lot of turns to wait. The final one is the snowcat. Requires a little bit more repair, but also requires fuel for you to escape. But there's also one new way that you can escape in this game, and that is actually to do a final showdown versus the killer, which utilizes this little interesting mechanic here in relation to these cards. So the way this works is if you find some binoculars as a survivor, you could take a look at one of these cards using the binoculars and see what is the hidden weakness of this killer. What is the thing that you can use against them to weaken them? With that, though, there is a life pool of the killer. So in this case, 30. And for every weakness you find, it reduces that health total before the final combat begins. But there's an alternative to that where the killer has a benefit of more strength if they are located in a certain region, which the killer could use to view that with this little device. It'll basically give you a color region, R, B, or G, based on the regions of the map and the colors we've already kind of talked about. So effectively, how does this game work? Let's go through the quick mechanics of that. As a survivor, you have one action that you can take on your turn, and there's a few different types of actions that you can complete. You can do a search, you can do a repair, you can move either 1 or 2 spaces, you can remove a block token from your location, you can remove all of your fear by sitting tight and removing your fear, or you may perform a special action, which will be something that may be on your character card or a item that you have uncovered. But you are restricted to only one of those actions. So you can move or you can do something. And that's kind of the tension point of this game, because almost everything that you do that is not just moving will create some sort of sound effect that will alert the killer to your presence or to your location. So it is very crucial that when you're doing things, you're doing it with the idea of where the killer is, which you always know at every given moment for the most part where the killer is until they cloak, in this specific killer case. But you have to weigh that, again, as I was saying, the cost-benefit analysis of, is it good to do this now and whatnot, and you're limited to that one singular action. The killer has a little bit of a different gameplay experience. The killer will have a set of cards available to them in their hand, and there is a timing window that they are allowed to play these cards, and they can play as many cards as they're allowed to have in their hand, as long as they're within the certain timing windows. And those timing windows are indicated by the bottom of the card action. So you have the lightning bolt, the combat symbol, this little up arrow, and that is all told right here on the killer's turn. So for most cases, the killer's turn will start on section 3. We'll talk about when you would start on section 1 or 2, but for the most part, you start on section 3, which lets you play any lightning bolt cards from your hand, such as this one that says move 1. So you can move one location as a killer, such as that. You can play any of these lightning bolt cards as you have in your hand, such as scan, which allows you to declare one of the zones, and if there are any survivors in that zone, then you know that, and then you get to choose a room, and if there are any survivors in that room, you will know that as well, so you can kind of narrow down where the survivors are at that moment. Okay. You also have this down or this arrow card. Basically, you can either move or perform a search. A search is basically asking the survivors, "Are you in the room that I'm in?" Or you can move. So you can move, or move and search, whatever. If you are ever in an instance where you have found the survivors as the killer, a combat round will ensue. We'll talk about that shortly because that's how you use the dice. You can alternatively, instead of doing those two actions, use a card that has an arrow which will replace it. It's kind of a special effect. So in the case of the deck that this has, it's a cloaking effect where you're going to go cloaking. Any survivors that are in your color zone, so again, like green, red, or blue, will gain fear, so you will know as the killer if there's anyone in your area, and then you're allowed to move 0 to 3 spaces, which with this map is pretty much the entire map. You can move from, here, like you can move almost anywhere you want on the map. It's a huge movement tool that you can use to get around. So that is what the cloaking does. And then you have some delayed effects that you can also use, which will take effect on the following turn, which is what the turns 1 and 2 is referring to. So if you are stealth, so if we used our cloaking, you will then uncover yourself. So you'll pop out, so that way the survivors don't know where you're at that moment. And if combat ensues, you will skip everything down to 6. Otherwise, you will just continue your turn as normal, and then delayed effects will take effect, which means this is an ability that lets you move for free, but you played it in the turn before. So it's kind of like I'm playing this for a future turn. And at the end of your turn, you will draw 3 more cards. You'll almost always be at your hand limit in this game as the killer, which is 5 at least to start with, and then depending on the killer, you will level up and get additional powers as you level up. And in this case, this killer gets additional +2 hand size when they hit level 3. So that's the rough of the game. The survivors are going to be moving around. They're going to be trying to find different types of gear that they're going to use to combat the monster. They're trying to find ways to escape the facility, deciding whether it's going to be repairing the radio tower, the snowcat, or finding the keys, or if they found enough gear that they potentially can look for the hidden weakness to fight against the monster itself. While the killer is just trying to find a way to kill one of the survivors. That's all they have to do, is find a way to kill one of them, and then that ends the game for the survivors. So now we're going to dive more into the actual mechanics of the game, and the things that I thought were interesting, the things that I thought were fun, the things that I had a little bit more of a question mark on in terms of its playability. So before I get too far into this, understand that this is also a prototype. All rules and things are subject to change, and the publisher, from what I can see on the Gamefound page, is actively working at changing some rules based on the community feedback. And I have emailed the publisher before I made this video asking for clarity on some of the rules. I have yet to get a response back, so I have to go based off of what my best experience is, understanding how this card works, as well as the player group that I use to play this game. I also don't have any experience playing the original Terrascape. My friend that I had come and help me play this prototype, one of them, has the all-in of Terrascape, the original. So he had some experience, and we leaned on him on understanding some of the nuances of the character cards, because some of them kind of come up into the issues of balance, and we're going to be talking about that. So the original Terrascape, at least from the experience that my friend shared, the killer has a massive advantage. It is very heavily favored towards the killer. And so coming into this, we thought we were going to see the same effect. But we found that this experience didn't seem as balanced as we thought it was going to be. The survivors, at least in this version, have a very good way of utilizing their abilities to continually escaping. And most notably, it was coming down to Roy, the leader, the commander, being a little broken in the sense of how this game operates at its core, and I think it's kind of a little bit breaking of the balancing that the game is trying to achieve. So before we dive straight into why I think Roy breaks the game, I will talk about several of the things that I thought mechanically I enjoyed. When I was playing on the survivor side, the game is incredibly enjoyable. I thought it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the back and forth hidden conversations that you're trying to have with your friends as you're trying to decide what's the best course of actions using your available actions, and to also not let the killer know what you're doing at that given moment. So to give an example, I wish I filmed sometimes our gameplays to kind of to show this, but for example, it's a lot of, how about we do this, then this, because of this, and this, and this. And when you're sitting on the opposite side as the killer, it just sounds like mumbo jumbo. Sometimes you're saying things and pointing to things which are total red herrings, because you're like, oh, what about this? We also want to make sure we're doing this, when we have actually no care about the fear or whatever. So you're doing things to continually throw things off. I thought that was a ton of fun. Adversely, though, playing as the killer on this one, I felt completely lost at times, with real lack of ability of understanding what the survivors are doing, and falling into the trap of potentially metagaming myself to figure out what they're doing. And again, it all comes down to it. at this point of what this character does. This specific killer has one form of tracking mechanism. It's the scanning ability, where you will say a color, so green. And in this case, they would say, yes, there are 2 survivors in green. And you say mess hall. There are no survivors in mess hall. So now at least the killer knows, well, there's someone hiding. There's at least 2 people hiding in the green section. I don't necessarily know where, but I know I can mark off the mess hall. That is their only true sense of identifying where the players are. Alternatively, the way you're supposed to do it is when the survivors make noise from an activity, at the end of their turn, they'll say, you heard noise in the mess hall, you heard noise in the hydroponics lab, whatever it may be. And because of the restrictions of the movement and the actions, for the most part, if someone were to make noise in the mess hall, that's because they looted items, such as what I'm doing here. And in the upper left corner of one of the items had a sound device, which means this makes sounds when you uncovered it. So in this exact case, actually, the mess hall would make noise. But because of, again, the limited actions that you have, the one action, either the move or search kind of items, this character is now stuck in the mess hall, and it allows the killer to know exactly where you are. But now let's talk about why I felt like Roy kind of breaks this game and kind of makes it hard for me to give a good analysis of the entire experience because of the character. Roy's ability says, guide the way. If you agree, so you and your friend, survivors who are adjacent to your location can gain an extra action to move to your location. So what does that mean? So let's say we've got Roy here on the platform, and we've got, I can't remember this gentleman's name, Quinto is in the mess hall. So Quinto starts his turn, and he performs a search action, finding an item, which will create a noise token, and then he's going to take an extra action to move here towards the platform. So now he has utilized Roy's turn to effectively extra action themselves, or action cheat. And when we say action cheat, it's not necessarily cheating. It means you're kind of breaking the known rules of the game by gaining an additional advantage. So by doing that, you are breaking the core concepts of what's happening. So now the killer knows, oh, there's noise in the mess hall. So I know that based off my rules of understanding, there's most likely, not always, but most likely something happening in the mess hall. So when they go there and perform the search action, they find nothing, they have now missed a turn. Another example that we had was the killer in our specific game ambushed one of our characters in the radio station who was performing a repair. He uncovered over here somewhere and popped up in the radio station. It was not something we expected, and we needed to get her. Actually, it was him. This was our character sheet, but it was actually this order. We needed to get him over here so we could heal him using our character's heal ability. So what we did is we moved here and then used the extra action to move him to the platform, which variably moved his potential location where he could be, and then she was able to utilize her action to then do a special action to heal him. So now the killer thinks, well, he can only move 2, potentially, because he used a weapon that removed his free movement. So he could only be in these 2 locations. So you kind of have an idea of where they could be, but it didn't work as well. And even if we were over here, this would even be harder to break because you have the potential access of a rope here. They could have done this and moved over here, and it just still exacerbates the same exact issue that we were just talking about, that the Roy issue exacerbated a lot of problems. Now, you could think to yourself, oh, well, if you know that, if you see noise in the mess hall, then let's kind of aim for the outsides because they're using Roy to cheat, action cheat. Well, that's what happened in our second game, and our monster player did that, trying to metagame, trying to understand, well, let's utilize situations, knowing that that's what this character does. And then the survivors on the alternative side were playing where they were using it at times and not using it at times to play mind games, which is great for the survivors that option is there, but the killer had no way of interacting with the heroes or the survivors and trying to find a way to actually defeat them. So I felt like the balancing is a little off. It didn't make the game unfun. So understand that. I had a ton of fun playing as the survivors and trying to come up with unique ways to utilize our abilities to win. But it also kind of, what I felt like, broke the spirit of the game. So for example, one of our games, the very first game we played, basically we had the survivors sat in mess hall nearly the entire game, while the other character kind of went around just making random noise just to be a distraction. But what they did is, what their strategy was, is you have the key deck, you have the keys that you are going to be able to escape with. It's a small deck, especially comparatively to the other ones. We're just going to brute force it by utilizing Roy's ability to basically continually hit the mess hall. So for example, turn one, Roy moves in here, she free cheats into there using his ability and immediately gets a key. With the monster starting the loading dock, the furthest that they are potentially able to go would be the platform. So the next turn, Roy moves over here, she hits the key again, and then action cheats again back to the crew quarters. So as a player playing as the monster, you're like, okay, they just made sound twice. They just uncovered 2 keys within the first turn. They're clearing the mess hall. So you move and search. You get nothing. So now you're like, what is going on? It breaks the concept of the game, and they were able, and then so now you're like, and then there's sound over here in the storage, because you're like, oh, okay, so now I'm going to move back over here. I don't know how they're doing that. And then he does it again, action cheats her back over again, she does it again, and she was able to basically double tap, hitting the mess hall key, and they got all the keys by the time the monster was like level 3, and then able to escape in the main exit and end the game very quickly. And it felt like, well, this didn't seem like the way the game was designed to be played. It seemed like it wasn't the survivors doing what you expected, which is sleeking around, taking advantages when they can to loot and trying to use deception. It just seemed like we're gaming the game is kind of the best way to describe it. And I didn't want this video, and I feel like this video is really coming down to Roy and how it kind of warped the game, and it did warp the game. But everything else about the system, and if you didn't play with Roy, really did open up the game. And we thought that, let's play games without Roy, let's play games with Roy, see how much he warps the game, and he does warp the game. So I think there's definitely a balancing issue there, at least with our interpretation of the rule. And again, I've emailed the publisher asking for clarity on how this works. I have not heard back, and it's been almost a week. So we'll read it again. If you agree, survivors who are adjacent to your location can extra action move one to your location. So on your turn as a survivor, you can perform an extra action and then take your additional action. So on each turn, choose one of the following 6 actions, and you may perform an extra action. So it allows you to get a bonus action that is a full action, though. Like, it's not just like a heal yourself, which also makes noise. Because if you look at some of these medical things, when you find a heal, you're making noise. So it's not like I'm gonna move here and heal, because then you're making noise when you're doing that as well. So like there's ways that the game is balanced, so the decisions the survivors make should have a consequence associated with it. It makes noise. It alerts to the villain where you're at. And so you have to be very smart of when do you do things and how do you integrate them. Now, like I said, this is not the only way that players, there's a ton of interactions. Like, you've got the cat, which makes noise, which is great. It's like a delayed sound. If you got the alarm clock that you could trigger that does like a 2-turn sound making. Those are things that I think are great, because they allow the players to set future traps to make noise on one side of the map while they do something on the other side of the map, and the killer has to decide, okay, well, which one's a bluff. So those are things I wanted to see more of. Those are interactions that I think are great and allow for the players to really kind of use their strategy and wit and kind of, play the game, I think, as the spirit of the game intends. Otherwise, you have other ways that are just gamey systems that are a little bit breaking the spirit of it. So I want to make sure I broke down that part about Roy. Other considerations, if they change this stuff, let's talk about the other parts of the game. Overall, I'm very impressed with this aspect. There's a lot of times, especially at a multiple player count, there's a lot of times when I play hidden movement type games that they might say 2 to 4 players, but I find them best at 2 players because you have one player playing the hunter, one player playing the seeker. This was the first time in a long time where I've played a hidden movement game that was multiple players, and I really enjoyed playing with a partner adjacent to me. Now, with that, warning, there are quarterbacking issues. There's a lot of you lose a little bit of your agency as a player unless you specifically say, no, we're playing with, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, you do whatever you want to do, and we're not going to really talk about it. For the most part, though, you're going to get a lot of talking back and forth, discussing different types of options and plans, and what do you think will be the best tactic with the available items you have. And just like other games that are cooperative, cooperative games like this, quarterbacking can be an issue, and that's always subjective to your player group. So make sure you're aware of that, and look at this game if that's what you're looking for in terms of like, does that work or does that not work? Some of the other things I would love to have seen playing as the killer. One of the coolest parts I thought was, and again, I haven't played the other one, so I don't know necessarily how those work, but one of the cooler things I liked was the leveling up aspect, that your killer is leveling up and gaining additional powers as the game progresses and gets to the climax. One of the things I thought was interesting is you have a card over here that you will actually draw into your hand when you reach a specific level. Now, this is a prototype. I'm not sure if there's going to be additional cards, but I would have loved to have seen more implementations of additional cards in your hand that give the killer a little bit more strategical options or different ways that they can play. I think that would be just awesome. Basically, just add one card to your hand. It's a powerful card. It deals damage to anyone it hits in a location, but you have to know they're there, obviously, so it's really powerful with the scanning tool. But it also takes your full turn to do it, so there's some balancing there, which is good. I think they balanced that card very well. But I would like to have seen maybe 1 or 2 more cards, maybe 3 cards total, to just give the killer a little bit more play, but it also reduces the leveling speed. So once you hit level 3, you get some more tools to reach, but you also reduce how quickly you can level up to 4 or 5, especially because your hand limit and with the specific character here increases. So you're gonna be doing a lot of stuff. So I think they're there. And again, this is only after several plays from me. There's to really hone the numbers of 1 card or 2 cards requires hundreds of playtests and understanding how does the changes affect the gameplay. So this is just me sharing how I thought my perspective was playing a specific side. And in this case, the killer, the cards are fun, but I wish there was a little bit more variety. Down here they have a selection of cards you play, but there's only 6 variety of cards. You have additional numbers on each of those, but there's only 6 different types of potential cards that you can play. So it doesn't give you a lot of breadth of, well, I'm going to play these different cards and these actions because I need to take advantage of this specific situation. I would like to see a little bit more strategic options there. But again, the way it's built now keeps the rules light, and it also makes it a little bit more appealing for players that are looking to jump right into an easier to learn game. I know I mentioned I was going to talk about the tower and the stuff like that. There's really not much to really share with this. I think it's a really cool feature, having a structure that is fully incapacitated or whatever. But overall, the game's combat system was pretty good. Effectively, the way the combat works is the survivors are going to engage in combat. They're going to review whatever gear they have, and they're going to select the order of how their survivors are going to engage the combat. So let's say, for example, we're in this situation. We've got 2 survivors and the killer. They'll decide, oh, okay, Roy will go first, and then, I can't remember this, Evelyn will go second. And then they look at their available gear, decide if they're going to use any of their one-time use gear or if they have any infinity gear like a pistol with revolver ammo. And then they'll roll their dice and calculate their number here plus their weapon versus the strength of the monster based on the monster's level, which is indicated here on their player card. And if they're at or over the monster strength, they win the combat. No damage happens and combat ends. But if they don't, they'll take damage. They'll indicate up here, which is another part of that, this tower being a part of the system. And then combat will ensue again against the next character. And that's eventually how you would eventually kill someone as the killer, is because you have to do 2 rounds of combat. You have to deal damage twice to person. But once this round is done, the heroes get a chance to run away and do a movement to kind of scatter before they go to their turn, and then they can move again effectively. Okay, so that is that. Overall, I know I really hammered in on the Roy things, and I think it's because it's so warped my impression of how this game is, and I want to make sure I'm clear that I think this does need to be changed or addressed or at least clarified. Are we doing it wrong, or is this correct? Is this something you can use every turn? Because that's how it felt like, is that you could basically break the game using the system. And I know I really hammered into it overall with this review, but my impressions of Terrascape as a whole, the system, I like it. I think it's a pretty cool system. I'm excited to check out what Terrascape 1 offers, because like I said, my friend has the all-in version of it. And I want to see what the other killers are that are involved in this game. There are at least 2 that I've seen, but we don't know what they are. In terms of the survivor's guide they provided us, the killers are there's just no information. They're just blurred out. So I don't know what they do and what their specific mechanics are and how they're going to integrate and change the gameplay style. But overall, I enjoyed the game. So don't watch this video thinking, oh, Brian just was pooping on this game and didn't like it. I liked it. I thought it was great. But I do think it's breakable in its current form with the mechanics that Roy is offering, and I'm wondering if that's intentional. And I want to make sure I bring that to the attention of the publishers and people who are looking at potentially buying this game for their collection. So if you found this video helpful, please leave a comment down below, share it with your friends, share it with anyone that might be interested with this, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. My name is Brian, and I will talk to you very soon. Thank you.